Welcome to the show, everyone. My guest today is Craig Garden. So Craig is an individual that I met at our men's retreat, our extremely conscious retreat that Mike Prince and I hosted just this past weekend as of the recording of this video. And Craig was introduced to me by a client of mine and a friend of mine and somebody that I'm also a client of as well, Laurent Goldstein. And Laurent mentioned to Craig about the retreat, and he said yes pretty much right away. And it wasn't because he had this unlimited abundance of time on his calendar. In fact, he had to move some very important things in his life to be able to be there. And we actually talked about that a bit on the podcast here today of, is it selfish for us as men, as individuals, as humans, to really take time for ourselves, to prioritize our mental health, our self-care, our personal development? And I think we know the answer to that, but I think you'll be interested by the conversation that we had around that and just how our individual perspectives have shifted over the years with regards to that. Because quite frankly, there's been some guilt associated with that of like, I can't really do this. Then I'm taking away time from that. And yeah, it's an interesting mind game that we go through when it comes to that. But Craig's an incredible individual. I mentioned it on the podcast that I believe that my life is on a completely different trajectory because of the kind of people I attract into my life, and Craig being one of those. He is the, if we were to label him as his title, which we did talk about that too, the idea of like, why do we always introduce ourselves based on our business and what we do for work? Maybe we should lean into that a little bit, but Craig is the CEO and the co-founder of a company called Eversio, which is a mushroom, functional mushroom, as well as psychedelic mushroom, hallucinogenic mushroom company based out of Vancouver, out of Surrey, BC. And Craig talked about his journey to get to the place to become the mushroom guy. Because how do you become the mushroom guy? I had to ask the question, like, what's the story there? So he dove deep into that, talking about his own experience growing up, as well as his experience, as well as his wife's experience with some illnesses, and then having kids and some of the challenges that they faced along their journey with that. And Craig's just an inspiring guy. I think he's somebody that every single person that's watching this is going to go, whoa, that guy's a powerful individual and he has a story to share. And I'm just grateful that I was able to extract a piece of that story here in this interview. And I'm looking forward to hearing even more as Craig goes deeper and deeper and deeper in being somebody that can help shift perspective and educate the world around the benefits of this incredible organic medicine that we have available to us. So yeah, with that, let's go and give this one a listen. All right, Mr. Craig Garden, what's happening, my friend? So good to see you again.
How you doing?
Yeah, doing good, man. And I'm looking forward to having this conversation with you. Obviously, we just got introduced to each other like a couple of weeks ago, and now we've shared in an experience on a weekend where we got to know each other on a deeper level. And I had an idea of what I wanted to talk to you about on this podcast before we did that weekend, and then it totally changed, to be perfectly honest. But it's a good thing, though, because I think we'll, we shared some really great conversations, and I'm looking forward to diving even deeper on those if you're up for it here today. So it's going to be fun.
Thanks for having me. I think, to that point, I'll say everything's on the table with me, as you probably well figured out last weekend. So, and I'm happy to take it wherever it goes.
Cool. Well, yeah, maybe we'll talk a little bit about the experience without giving away all of the stuff so that people in the future can experience it for themselves. But I do want to say, first of all, that I just appreciate you and how you showed up last weekend as well. I think, especially on the Friday night, you speaking up kind of cracked the nut open for everybody to go, okay, that's what this weekend is. That's how we're going to show up. So, just a bit of gratitude for you for that. And then it continued on throughout the whole weekend. I think we had some really great, deep, meaningful conversations that are needed in this world. We all need a space and some brothers to actually have some real conversations with,
Yeah, I can't agree more. I think, the timing was so fitting. In which, we got together in the first place, heard of one another. and then reached out and then actually, like, yeah, let's go and do this. And then going up there and being a part of that experience it was really enlightening. I think for somebody coming from a young age where you're told to like just file things away, which we talked about, to where I am in my life now, and that's just like, no, let's not do that. Let's share, because sharing is caring, and I think the world needs more of that than anything else for abundance right now. So you provided the space, mister. I just showed up, and I think it was a great experience for me. I learned a lot about myself, and I think I learned a lot about some other individuals out there that, it's just, we're all in the same boat, right? So if we all can put an oar in and help out, it sure makes it a heck of a lot easier to manage everything.
Yeah. Right on. Well, we'll get into some of the juicy stuff on all of that. And really quickly here, I'm just going to mention there's a quote by Brene Brown, actually, that I tell everybody when we start these conversations, kind of ground us in what we're here to do. And that is, one day you will tell your story of how you overcame what you went through, and it will become somebody else's survival guide. So that's our grounding here as we dig into the story of Craig and find out a little bit more about you beyond just the title that you have as CEO, co-founder of Eversio as well, which I want to maybe start with that and then maybe go back to what brought you to here. But one of the things I took away from the weekend was that we didn't talk a lot of business. Nobody did, right? There maybe was some initial introductions when the guys were first meeting each other where it was like, so what do you do? And it's just kind of this default that we go to, isn't it? But we brought it up on the Friday to address that. Like, how are you introducing yourself? Who are you? And what came up for you when that question was presented? Who are you at the very start of the retreat?
Yeah, I think I agree. I think it's interesting in society how that's where our default mode goes to, like, hey, what do you do? And that's almost how people measure themselves up, so to speak. If ego's present or ego isn't present. So I find it always an interesting bit of a social experiment that way. I think it was neat to see that, everybody kind of came at it from different ways. And for me, it was just, being open and honest and just saying, hey, I'm that crazy mushroom guy that everybody talks to. And I just kind of throw it out like that, because then it really doesn't, the title is something here that, as much as you said it, it's not important to us here at Eversio. I'm no more important as a CEO and co-founder than the mycologist in the lab or somebody answering the phone at the front desk. Like, it's a complete team effort, and I think that's an old stigma that possibly needs to change in order to bring, the change required so that everyone feels like they're on an equal playing field.
Yeah. Well, there's so many paths I can go down on that side of the conversation too. Yeah. And I think we probably will, just this whole idea of leadership. But I really do believe that, you showing up for yourself and making the time, which, by the way, you made some sacrifices and made some choices to not be at other things in order to be there. And I speak about this a lot, the idea of, is it selfish of us to actually spend me time or time doing self-reflection and actually slowing down a little bit in order to speed up? Does that actually help you, your business, your relationships, your family life, all of that kind of stuff? And I think it's a resounding yes, of course it does. But we still kind of have this inner guilt almost. I know I do anyways. It's like, oh, can I really go do that? Is that going to actually resonate with my team, knowing that I'm going and doing this kind of stuff when I could be doing something else? What's been your perspective on that? And then we'll maybe dive back into how you got here. But just as a leader within your company, what does that do for your people that work with and for you?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think, my answer to that is yes, you absolutely need to take some time for yourself. I think as somebody like managing that ship or running that ship, we're often, the last person to take that time out. And I think I learned it probably about 3 years ago on my journey in this company, was just what I would do is run away to the mountains. I would go until I didn't have a cell phone reception anymore. And it sounds crazy. And that's getting harder and harder to do in today's world, because you'd be shocked on where you can get cell phone service in the middle of like the mountains. But that's what I would do. And then at that point, that guilt that you spoke about would diminish, because, hey, if somebody can't get a hold of me, then I don't have to be accountable per se, or I don't have to feel bad about not being accountable. So I think it's really important. And I think if we don't take that opportunity and that time to set that tone for everybody else working in our organization, then it almost becomes the opposite of what you're trying to achieve. And it becomes very toxic, right? Because, you can work till you pass out, literally. But is that the best thing for you and what you want to show your people that you work with, your team? So yeah, no, you've got to take time out straight up. And I think that's the hardest part. That is the work for me, is doing that. But I do know on the other side, when I come back from doing that, I will say by and large, everyone's like, wow, like, what did you do? Because you're so different. You're so zen. You've just chilled right out. And I think that's the inspiring part for me, to be selfish and take that time moving forward to continue on with that practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I got to address the irony of what we're talking about here too, because when we started this conversation, both of us, I actually posted publicly that I had a day yesterday. It was a bit of a hot mess, and you had a very similar experience too, right? What time were you up at again? And when did that day end?
Yeah, I started yesterday at 2:30 in the morning, and I basically passed out about 10:30 out of exhaustion. So yeah, that is the irony. It couldn't be closer to the truth with that, for sure. But that's the other end of it, right? You work hard, and then I say play hard too. So on the other side of it, right? But there's balance. So sorry, go for it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I just wanted us to say that out loud, because if anybody's listening to this and thinking, wow, look at these two like elevated Zen businessmen that are just like making all the right decisions. It's like, dude, no, like there's days, and we get to be forgiving of ourselves, but also make time. And I know part of that day yesterday for you was your mom's 70th birthday as well, right? So it wasn't like it was all work. And how did you find that actually? That's maybe another interesting piece to discuss. How have you found being a busy executive professional and then being able to turn that off when it's family time or going off to an important milestone birthday party and that type of thing? What was the experience like yesterday for you specifically?
Wow, man. You're asking some really good questions. You've done this before.
A couple times.
I struggle with it straight up. Like I struggle with it. And I think that is the work that I try, and my wife tries to remind me as my business partner, that like, okay, great. Now we're here. Like the phone's blowing up until the moment that you pull up, and literally, and then it's still blowing up and you're like, okay, I'm going to put that on silent. I'm going to shove it in my pocket. And you try to go in and just, really take that time out to be present with others. And I think, can I do a better job of it? Always I can be. But I really try to, same as I walk into a meeting, just like this, I put my phone on vibrate. I turn it upside down so that I'm not distracted by it, because we live in this day and age where that seems to be just like how everybody functions. And I don't think you can help it sometimes, but if you're trying to be truly present with the people around you and show them that undivided attention, you need to, as hard as it is. So yeah, that's the hard work, man. But I was able to do it for 2 hours and then literally went back to it right after. So yeah, guilty as charged.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm glad we got to say that out loud though, because it's just the truth, right? It's we are all, I think, working at finding that balance and looking for the answers, knowing that the slow down to speed up analogy is very true. I know I've experienced it myself, but it's like I'm hardwired to and programmed to do the opposite. Like the last 15 years of my life, I don't know about you, but it's just been like, go, go, go. And what's next? And let me see how I can actually just keep rising up, and not just the company, but even me personally. I'm addicted to growth. And I've had to reframe, and I'm still in the process of, you know what? having non-negotiable time to meditate and do breath work or just go for a walk or whatever, man, it's got to be a part of the puzzle here, or else all of this stuff just doesn't work. And it's not worth it even. It feels like we're just constantly chasing. Can you relate?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. For me, it's grounding, right? Like taking that time out to meditate. Somebody gave me an analogy one time of when I set out to do this business, and they're like, yeah, you're going to go ahead and do this, and then you're going to go public, and this is, you better be able to meditate on a rocket ship, like lifting off. And I was like, I didn't really get that at that point in time, because I've run my own business before in other areas and other, businesses in terms of like what that was about. But getting into this business, I really knew nothing about it by and large in terms of CPG and things like that. So heavy learning curve. And literally, it is like that. So you need to take time out. Like I have a 12 o'clock meditation blocked in my calendar, and it's like the sacred time for the middle of the day unwind. And if I can go outside, because it's nice, and this has not been a good year for it, but I love to go outside and just put my feet in the grass and take the time to do that and ground out. And you'd be amazed. You'd just be floored. Like if you're present to that moment and you can shut everything else off and find that quiet space, that's where I find my recharge in the middle of the day to carry on with some of the chaos or madness that we surround ourselves with by choice or by default in a day-to-day in this environment we call work and life.
Yeah. I love that analogy, the find the silence on a rocket ship, or however you referenced it there. It's so true, right? Especially if you're doing that in the middle of the day, because there's always something you could be running to, an email inbox or a messaging service or somebody that's pulling at your arm asking for some answers to questions. So that's something that I'm going to have to look at here even too, because I haven't been doing that. I typically would maybe start my day with the quiet and the calm, and haven't been overly consistent with it. It's something that I'm actually working towards turning into more of a habit. But so let's dig in maybe a little bit to how does one become the mushroom man? And feel free to go back as far as you want on that journey, because I know you shared a bit about it at the retreat as well, just kind of what brought you to this point and why you're passionate about it. But yeah, feel free to go in whatever direction you want with that, and I'll just pick up from what you're putting down.
Oh, wow. Well, I hope we got a few minutes. It's a bit of a story.
We got time, man.
I'll keep it as brief as I can. But I mean, yeah, so for me, getting into this line of work, it was kind of, it just kind of happened. But when I look back at it and what led my wife and I into where we are now with it, in terms of, we've got two businesses. We've got a research and development side to it, and then we've got a CPG, which is consumer packaged good line of functional mushroom products. So what led us there? Well, we wind the clock back, way back when. I've been with my wife 22 years now. When she was 28 and we had our son, he was 2 years old, Nolan. There was a point in time in which she couldn't walk down the stairs and she couldn't eat. She was eating through like a straw. And this all came on very suddenly. And we were like, what's going on? And it turns out it was a condition called psoriatic arthritis, in which it's an overproduction of skin cells, is how it presents on the surface of your skin. And then the arthritis component is actually what's in the joints. And so this combination of these two things pairing together would mean that it would move, like rheumatoid arthritis. It would move around in her body and present in different areas. And I remember her saying to me, like, because we were very active people and always have been, and she was crying to me one day and she said, like, you should go. Like, I'm going to hold you back, and I don't want to hold you back. And I was like, that's not even an option. Like, what are you talking about, babe? Like, we're going to figure this out. So like everything, like anyone, you go and you do a bunch of research. And after about 2 months, it just so happened there was this research study that was coming along, and it was for this injection, once a month injection called Symphony. And it was a biologic, and we enrolled her right away. We got her in, And she got the placebo, of course, for the first 6 months. So she was no better. And she was just like, I don't know, like, this is so bad. There was tears every night. And then the 6-month trial ended. She got the real deal in terms of what they were offering. And within 4 days, all symptoms gone. Like, it was remarkable. And we were like, this is the miracle drug, right? Here we go. So, fast forward, her taking that drug once a month, to the tune of about $8,000 a month, which not all of it was covered under medical care. So, we're scraping together everything we have to make that work at that point in time. It was a lot of money. It's still a lot of money. And over the course of her taking that 12 years, she got skin cancer 3 times.
Jeez.
And we had decided, she had decided more than we, but she had decided if that's the worst that's going to come of this and I can still live my life, I would rather be able to live a full life than live a life in which it can't be full and deal with this every day and the pain of it. So I said, okay, that's what it is. Away we go. On the 12th year of taking it, I believe it was the 12th year, she was driving my daughter. At this point, we had another child. And she was driving my daughter and she had a seizure while she was driving. And of course, so she gets rushed into the hospital, and we have an MRI done on her brain, and she's got this white matter built up, which the doctor said, well, that's really weird because that would be something that you would typically see in like a 70 to 80-year-old person. And we were like, what? And he started asking questions like, are you guys healthy? And yeah, we explained it all. But the only thing that we couldn't figure out was this damn injection. Like, it kept coming back to like, well, what's in this thing, right? But because it was in this study, they were not releasing all the information in terms of what was in it. So we didn't know. But that was the only thing that we could conclude. And so at that point, just like 12 years before, we were like, pump the brakes, like, whoa, we gotta figure something else out. So that's where we went into the rabbit hole of mushrooms, and really started to do a bunch of research. It wasn't mushrooms per se that we went down into to look and explore. It's just where the research kept coming back in Eastern medicine and how this was, so many conditions, whether it be arthritis, whether it be inflammation, whether it be like brain fog and brain decay in terms of like Alzheimer's and dementia and things like that were all predisposition for. What do people do? What trials are there? What information? What scientific papers there are? So we read, I'm telling you, man, over the course of a year, we probably read thousands of articles on this stuff. And we became like mushroom nerds over it. And so at that point, we ordered a bunch of products from the internet, Amazon, everywhere we get our hands on it, and tested them. And then I was like, well, let's test them because we want to know what's in these products. And what we found is there was a lot of just filler in them. And we're going, well, if we're trying to cut out wheat for inflammation, I don't know how much you know about that, but wheat's a big one for inflammation. Why do we want to be taking that? And if we're seeking a therapeutic dose, how do we get that when all these products out there, 95% of them, were just filler? And we were really saddened by that. So of course, being the person that I am as a project manager at that time, I'm going, well, we can figure this out. How hard could it be? I think that was kind of the beginning of of how the whole thing started in terms of the mushroom exploration. And so we scoured the earth and we took samples from everywhere you can think of, and then some places in between. And what we were really seeking was organic and mushrooms that were grown in nature, on logs, because that's where all the beneficial compounds come from. They don't come from being grown on wheat or rice or anything like that. So we sourced a bunch of stuff, brought it in, tested it all, and then formulated it ourselves and put these formulations together that we started taking. And about 6 months into that is where we really incorporated the business at that point in time and said, hey, if this is working for us, there's got to be some other people that would like it. Because our family started asking, what's going on with Brandy? How is she so much better? And, oh, here, try this. Oh, really? Can I get more of that? And we're like, yeah, I guess so. Okay, we'll bring some more in. And then it kind of just mushroomed into literally, I was like, yeah, I'm bad with it. But it really just, it just grew into creating a line of products and putting a team together. And I came in here one day to the office, a consulting firm, and said, hey, we're going to grow, or not, I did say we're going to grow mushrooms. I said, let's start a mushroom business. And everyone looked at me and they were like, what? And I was like, yeah, let's start a mushroom business. And my wife was like, sure, let's do it. So we literally did it. And we put a license into Health Canada at the same time for something that's called a controlled substance dealer's license to enable us to grow, harvest, and work with psychedelic mushrooms at that same time. Because that research, there was a lot of like psychedelic components that kept coming drawn into that initial research. And for us, we were like, that's really cool. Let's learn more about it at the same time. So that's really how both companies were formed initially, Trevor.
I was just going to ask you about that, actually. What's the terminology you use? Is it functional mushrooms? It's kind of like the organic, non-psychedelic side of it. And then there's the psychedelic side, right? Those are kind of the two spectrums of it.
Yeah, that's it, man. Yeah, so we reference anything non-hallucinogenic as functional mushrooms because, and our mycologist here would be mad if he heard me say that because he believes that all mushrooms are functional mushrooms. Like, why do they get this prestigious title when all mushrooms are functional? And he's right. I mean, all mushrooms have beneficial compounds in them, but by and large, there's about 20 that we've really done a lot of research on in the last 100 years for these therapeutic compounds that are present in them that we look at. So that's your lion's mane, your reishi, your cordyceps, your maitake, shiitake, tremolo, and a bunch of others as well. But we work with about 9 primarily on that end of the business. And then there is the psychoactive ones, which are psilocybe cubensis mushrooms, predominantly is the species that we work with. And we have like 32 different strains right now that we work with in our lab in cultivating and just exploring their potency and working to get them in the hands of all Canadians because, well, that's a whole nother podcast, but
yeah,
we can talk about it if you want, but
yeah. You know. Well, I do want to talk about that a little bit. And just to clarify too, like, was your wife taking the ones that you're referring to as the functional ones, or was she taking also the hallucinogenic psychedelic ones?
Yeah, good question. So she was only taking the functional ones. Like at that point in time, to provide some further background, my wife was a grade 4 elementary school teacher for 20 years. And so at that same time, while she was teaching and we were going through this, I was a project manager for our own consultant company. And by and large, doing high-rise development, as well as early on 10 years ago, I did a lot of cannabis LPs, like the building of these facilities for these growers, licensed producers. And so it was kind of like, I'm doing this, and she's saying, teaching our kids drugs are bad. And it was a hard thing in our home, right, at that point in time, right? Because on one hand, it put food on the table. On the other hand, of course, you know, she's been told and she's instructed to tell her kids, like, all drugs are bad, right? So it was a real clash at that point in time in our relationship as well. But back to your question, she was only taking functional mushrooms, and that's where we deal like with high extract mushrooms. So 8-to-1, 12-to-1, 16-to-1, where we're taking like 16 grams of mushrooms and condensing that down into 1 gram. And then you have to take just a little bit of that to get a therapeutic dose, according to what Health Canada says. The highest allowable dose that you can take safely, even though they're just mushrooms and you can't overdose on functional mushrooms. That's what we were seeking to deal with her psoriatic arthritis. And I might add that now 2.5 years later, she's in full remission. Like, she has no symptoms at all. It's amazing.
No doubt. Man, this brings up so many different paths that I think we can go down here. But the one that comes to mind first is just, I know when we first met, you were in an airport flying out to Kingston to go and speak at an event that was more on the psychedelic side of the industry, right? And you expressed to me at the retreat that It was an interesting experience. I think you referred to it as, the people that are kind of in the trenches and doing the research and seeing the results and just battling the systems, including the education side of things, to just get the truth out into the world. And then there was the corporate types that were there with the suit and ties on, just to put a massive label on them. But, seeing like, what's the business side of all of this stuff? And maybe let's speak about that briefly too, because you talked about as well, you getting emotional when you were there, and that was something that I think really connected you with the people that were there in attendance as well, because they could see that this isn't just a business that's planning to go public so that you can make a bunch of money. This actually has some grounded meaning behind it, like purpose in your life, doesn't it?
Yeah, so much so. And I think, so we back up and before COVID is where we started this journey. And we did it primarily on the psychedelic side because we saw so many of our friends that are like first responders and just friends and family that are all just suffering, Trevor. There's so many people suffering out there. And at that point, when we had created the other business, I thought, well, we should just do this too, because I'm on the back 40 of my life. And if anything I've learned is I've learned a lot of information. If I can apply what I've learned to something else and learn to do something else and do things that are hard, those are the best things, worth doing at the end of the day. So I felt somewhat of an obligation to see if I could help people, given all the research that I had read on psychedelic mushrooms. And I mean, they're all over the headlines now in terms of what you see and the benefits that are being explored behind them, from, PTSD, anxiety, depression, obesity, addiction. Like, there's just no end to where we are in understanding further their benefits, these psychedelic mushrooms, if taken in the right set and setting. And so, 2 years in the COVID, you're not seeing people, you're not going out and doing any of that stuff. We were growing our business, and a lot of other businesses were imploding. Others were growing. There was all this diversity happening around us. So this was like the first opportunity to actually get in front of a bunch of people to hear what else is going on out there. There was a bunch of Zooms and stuff like that. But, as there's only so much connection that's behind that in terms of feeling and emotions and your gut check, if you will. So it was interesting to be invited to this Catalyst Summit. It was what it was called. And it was it was in Kingston, Ontario, at Queen's University. And there was 3 different rooms going at any given time, and they had speakers from all around the world. Like Paul Stamets was there, Mark Hayden. There was senators there from Canada. Like, just pretty much anything you could think of was there. So it was really great to meet all these humans that we've learned about in our reading and some conversations with, others never at all, and just connect. And I think that human connection is what was just so important. It reignited a fire both in Brandy and myself and Allison from our team who came there, and getting a chance to talk on that panel about why we're doing it. We set out in what we're doing to really change the lives of people through fungi. And straight up, I think, Mother Earth put them here. We've evolved from them, I believe. And we've consumed them for a very long time, whether it be in traditional setting, in First Nations, or just evolution of picking them and being hungry and evolving, right? So yeah, it was great to go there and be with these people and tell my story, or our story, I should say. I'm one component of it. And I think what, people really connected with that on a certain level, because just willing to get emotional. I didn't intend to. It's just when you really love what you're doing and you're being honest to yourself, I find being raw, people really connect with it sometimes, just because that's all we are at the end of the day. We're this energy, and we need that connection in order to feel fulfilled at the end of the day. So.
Yes, absolutely. It was kind of the foundation of the weekend that we all just experienced together, even too, is that acknowledgement of we're all just here trying to navigate this crazy thing called life and have some fun along the way and make some money along the way, because that's what we do in this kind of 3D world. We make money to buy stuff and do things and all of that. But I'm glad you brought up the reference to the connection to the earth as well and the spiritual side of this, because that was one of the conversations I remembered we kind of had as a collective group, or at least there was a few people around, and we were speaking about mushrooms and how when they do grow on these trees or in the earth even, that there's this network of how they're connected to everything. And at first it was a conversation where your thoughts go to like, okay, this is getting a little woo-woo right now, but I catch myself really quick on that to go, no, it's not. There's nothing woo-woo about any of these things. This is just the seeking of truth. But maybe speak to that a little bit too. Like, what's been your experience as you started to discover all of these things, trying to solve a problem, right? With what your wife was going through. Have you found, like in the last dozen years or so, or even just recently, that you see the world in a different way, or even see this universe that we live in a different way, and that the mushrooms have kind of helped tap you into that a little bit? You know where I'm going with that?
You got some great questions. Yeah, I know where you're going with it. Okay. Yeah, no, I think unquestionably they have. And for me, it's, as I said, it started down the journey with the functional mushrooms, but, truth be told, I consume psychedelic mushrooms as well. And whether it be in a microdose to help with daily, just tasks and getting to that flow state, which I do, from time to time, or it be a macro dose with a clinical counselor, and creating that proper set and setting that I've spoken about, and actually consuming like a macro dose of mushrooms, like 5 to 7 grams, and then working on what came up during that afterwards to do the integration. That's where you get the work done. Like, we're all products of this environment that we call life, and people say, "Hey, aren't you really glad to get back to like how things were before COVID?" And I'm like, actually, no, I think shit was broken. So I'm happy to get back to like what I think should be the new norm. And that is loving awareness. And that sounds cliche and all the rest of the stuff to some people out there, I'm sure, but that's all we are at the end of the day. And if we treated each other with that, which comes from the earth, and you can't tell me you don't feel a connection to it if you just take the time out to go sit on a piece of grass or in a forest, or there's nothing wrong with that. And quite frankly, I think there needs to be more of it. So my experience is, I take psychedelic mushrooms once a year, and to go through that big reconnection with Mother Earth. And for me, in doing that, what I found through my journeys is that there is a deep connection to, the earth and the things that and the animals and the humans. And I like to say, when you come out of an experience like that, if you go into it with that proper intention and setting, I like to say you're like a baby, a newborn baby afterwards. Like, you should not make any life-altering decisions after you do something like that for a good 10 days. Because you're literally like, everything is brighter, everything's simpler. And when I say simple, I mean like dumbing it down to like, really, you were stressed out the day before about all this crazy stuff you got going in your work life and your home life and all that stuff. And really, does any of that matter? No, it doesn't. Are you healthy? Do you have people in your life and are surrounded by people that, make you happy and fill you up and bring that loving connection? If you have those things, which most of us do in some shape or form, and some don't, those mushrooms allow those walls to be broken down and those connections to be regenerated, so that you can bring that feeling back into your life and that connection, not only to earth, but to yourself. Because for myself, I had a form of PTSD that I didn't even know about. And it goes back to when I was 8 years old. So, and I never would have found out about that. Like, all the therapy in the world never would have dug that out of me, just because of the person that I was going into that experience initially. So, I don't know if
Yeah,
that answers
man.
your
It's,
question.
well, hey, whatever it is, it is. But it brings up more things for me, though, too, which is when Mike Prince and I, when we were organizing the retreat and we created all the pieces that we needed to kind of put it out into the world and then mentioned it to Laurent, who knew you obviously, and he mentioned it to you. And then you showed up. Like Mike and I met in a way that was just, of course we met, there was intention behind that, and it was we were destined to meet. Right. And I believe the same is in meeting you, because both of us, Mike has his own journey that he's been down with his battle with Lyme disease. And then for me, and just in the last 6 months, it was just hitting a point where I was like, there's got to be more to this. Like, what questions am I not asking right now that I should be asking, that I don't know what to ask, that I feel stupid for asking, and then also fearful of asking even too, like the idea of questioning death even. That was a big one for me back in January, where I started to see the pandemic even too, as this very divisive thing that was going on in society. You talk about mental health, like some people are on one side extreme and others on another side. And in my case, when I started to speak up about the fact that I was feeling really isolated and restricted from everyday society because I couldn't take my kids to swimming lessons because I chose not to get vaccinated, I had a cousin who is working as an EMT, who is extremely on the opposite side of me. And it created a lot of conflict, and it was quite frankly very uncomfortable, and I had to go deep and just start thinking, like, why does he think that way? Like, part of me wants to go, what the hell's wrong with you? And then the next part is, wait a second. He has an experience in his life that makes what he believes to be true his truth. Like, it's true. Like, who am I to question that, And then I just thought, like, he's surrounded by death all day. He's taking people from seniors' homes into the ER, and he sees it all the time. So it got me thinking, well, what is death? And anyways, to kind of bring it full circle to the psychedelics and just your experience that you have had and what you say you do on a yearly basis, Mike and I have talked about, like, maybe we can introduce something like this into a retreat. And we thought, well, maybe not this one, because we're both still exploring, it would have been a little bit rushed to do that. But I am interested in it, and it also scares me. I'll be honest. And you and I talked about this. It's because my experience with mushrooms was, as like a teenager or in the college days, getting handed a chocolate and then going to the bar. You know what I mean? And then going home and seeing frickin' spiders on the wall. Like, it was just not a good experience, but it was the environment that I was in. It was the space I was in, all of these things. So I guess I'm just saying out loud that, like, I'm so obsessively curious about what you're talking about. And I have so many questions, and I feel like some of them are stupid, just like I was thinking 6 months ago.
No stupid questions, Trevor.
Yeah.
There's only the ones we're afraid to ask, right? That you don't ask, right? You've got to ask them. I like to say there's no bad ideas and there's no bad questions. So shoot.
Yeah. Yeah. So like with the mushrooms, like naturally when I start thinking about all of this stuff, there's a lot of different paths to go down, right? So you think about ayahuasca ceremonies. You think about the Cambo, like what Mike did as a part of his healing on the Lyme disease side of things. And then, of course, there's this as well. And I think one of the things I'm just taking away right now is that there is a safe way to do this in a controlled environment that you can actually have the experience that you're looking for without just taking something randomly, without really knowing exactly kind of the path to have that experience. Is that true? That's what I heard from you.
100%. Yeah, 100%. You're totally right. Like I too took mushrooms when I was a teenager and experimented with that. Like probably.
Yeah, that's the truth, Mom and Dad, in case you didn't know.
Exactly. Right? The cat's out of the bag. I mean, I've got a 16-year-old son, and I'm pretty sure at some point he's going to do that too. But that was a very different experience in terms of what I'm talking about, because you don't know what you don't know at that age, and your brain's still developing. And, I think you really, what we're more talking about is something that I call set and setting, right? And creating putting that intention behind what you're going to do. So that, which is very different, right? When we're kids, we're taking mushrooms, we're like, let's go, or going to a party. And I mean, geez, the thought of doing that now, like that would scare the shit out of me. I would never do that. But now, you fast forward and you go, you've got all these questions and you've got reservations behind it. And, you said something that resonated with me, and that you're scared. And, I'd love to speak to that too, right? Because I think for me, I was very scared too, and that's where I think this substance should never go like recreational. It's whatever, ayahuasca, 5-MeO, LSD, any of these things, other than like in a micro dose where it should probably still be controlled in terms of what you're getting, and know how it was made and whatnot behind it to some degree, whether it be natural or synthetic. You got to be really careful about it, because it's a very strong medicine. And that's where creating that setting. So, for me, where do I do it? I try to find a place that's out in the woods and where I am connected to nature, because that is, for me, everything. There's clinic models, and you could do it in clinics as well. But for me, some people feel very safe in that environment. For me, that doesn't work. The other thing is like having a psychotherapist with you, right? Somebody that can, or a counselor, somebody that can hold that space so that it's a safe environment, so that when you consume these medicines, if you consume a macro dose, like you could be in a burning building and you wouldn't know, is what I like to say. Yeah. Like if you're taking a large macro dose, you're out of it, right? So you need somebody there in case the phone rings or there's an emergency that can deal and handle that and allow you to be focused on what you're doing and that experience at hand. So that's really important. And then, there's actually consuming the medicine itself. And, when you make that statement about being scared, I think my personal belief is this, I will say that until you can come to a point in which you've explored a lot of other things in terms of asking the questions that you need to ask in order to feel like you understand enough about what's going to happen, and then be comfortable with the unknown. You have to be comfortable at some point with not having control. Control's an illusion. None of us have control. Something can happen right now while we're having this conversation or following, and we got no control over it. So you need to be able to get to a point where you say, you know what? I looked at it personally as if I could get 1% better as a human being, as a biohacker, a deep biohacker. I like to do all that stuff. If I could be 1% better as a human to my wife, to my children, to the people that I surround myself with, whether it be friends or work, I'm going to try this, because what do I have to lose? At this point, what do I have to lose? And that's how I chose to go down that. So again, had somebody who could hold that space. I worked on some of the things that could come up or that I thought may come up while I take this macro dose and this journey, and then went through this beautiful experience. And there was frightening parts to it as well. And I will add that what I thought I was creating and would happen, none of that happened. So just goes to show you control, there's no such thing as it. You can set the intention behind it, but really that's the beauty behind this medicine and other psychedelics. They have the ability to pull out, what do you need to get out of this experience? And I find the people who say that they have a bad trip, there's no such thing. There's just what is. And if that shit that comes up is bad, likely that is something that's happening in your day-to-day that you need to deal with and learn how you're ignoring exactly how to deal with that more efficiently so that you can be a better version of yourself through all those things that I mentioned before. So yeah, I think that's, you got to get to that point. And only then when you're at that point and you have those other pieces of the game of chess, in play, then it's the right time to do it.
Oh, I'm grateful for this conversation, because this is just another piece of my journey of exploration and curiosity around things that scare me. Like we spoke about it at the retreats when we jumped into the cold water. When I first did that, it was the same kind of feeling, you know, it was like, I'm scared, man. Like, I don't want to do this. And it was actually a physical thing, right? Because we know that like cold water is cold. Like there's no way around it. It's cold every single time. It doesn't warm up. But I leaned into that too. And just layering on these things, like you mentioned, 1% better. And to me, it's not just the functional organic medicines that we have available to us, but it's also experiences. It's also conversations that might have made you uncomfortable in the past that we get to have. And that's what our intention was in creating the space for the retreat too. So yeah, I love this conversation. I want to take us down one other path here to kind of wrap us on this conversation, which, by the way, I always do follow-ups on my podcast too, because we got way too many things to talk about, man. So we'll book another one as well after this. But
okay.
I want to speak about your kids a little bit too, and just your journey on that side of things, because now that I know more about your journey to get to here and the business and your wife and your relationship and just all of that stuff, the education that you're committed to bringing to the world to help people understand these things a little better. The conversation that you and I had as we were stoking the sauna fire at the retreat, I don't think I expressed this to you, but you shared some stuff with me about your experience in having kids and the calls that you got from doctors and the time that you had to spend in the NICU and stuff with your kids, where I actually thought to myself, holy man, here's somebody who really understands what I went through. And then there was a level of like, oh my gosh, you are still in that phase years and years later of really being so attentive to your kids and their health. Whereas with me and my wife, we had a scare for a good 4 months where we weren't sure if our son would survive because he was only a pound and 3 ounces when he was born. So we spent the first 4 months in the NICU with him. But since then, he's been pretty good, you know, like he's got big, thick bottle cap glasses. But aside from that, he's healthy, you know, like he's healthy and he's functioning good and he's growing and all of that. And anyways, I just want to kind of open the space for that, for you to share as much as you want around your experience in having kids and what that's, just the conversation that we had around the sauna.
Yeah, sure. So, I have 2 beautiful children, and they're obviously why I do this every day. They're why I keep grinding and doing what I do, and I'm wanting to share what we've learned along the way. So, my son's 16 and my daughter's 11, and they both have something called phenylketonuria, which that sounds like a mouthful. It is. We call it PKU for short. And, when your kid's born and you got this beautiful baby and you're like, wow, this thing is the best. What you don't know is they actually heel poke your children and they draw some blood out of the heel of your child and they send it off to screening. And one of the things they're screening for is something called PKU. And so we had just got home with our baby, brand new baby boy, Nolan. And we're like, wow, we did it. We made this beautiful little human. And no sooner do we get home, we get the phone call from Children's Hospital that night. And they're like, hey, we need you to come to Children's Hospital tomorrow morning and to do some more follow-up testing with Nolan. And we're like, well, what's wrong? And they're like, well, we'll talk to you about it tomorrow morning. Of course, that doesn't go over well as a parent. And you're like, well, no, we'd like to know about it now. They say it's probably a bad result because the odds of this happening are like you could win the Powerball. It'd be the equivalent of winning the lottery, right? So, okay, so we check it out online. We're up all night. We cry. We bring our son to the children's the next morning. They admit us, and they start doing the blood work, and it comes back that in fact, he does have something called PKU. So, like at that point, they checked my wife into the hospital for 2 months, where she wasn't allowed to leave because we had to learn how. She couldn't breastfeed. She couldn't do any of these things because It's a metabolic condition in which they're missing an enzyme in their liver that metabolizes protein. And if it's not controlled by diet and formula, then there is these phenylalanine levels build up in the blood, and they actually cause mental retardation. They can if it's not monitored. So, we learned how to do that, and it was like weighing everything back then, 16 years ago, right? Like there was the apps were just coming out and stuff like that, and so we had to do everything longhand. So it was like weighing what he ate, weighing what he drank, the formula, then recording it, and then emailing this every day to Children's Hospital, blood tests every 2-3 days to see where his phenylalanine levels were in his blood, and just monitoring that and getting him into a comfortable place where, none of that damage could occur. So we really took that on as like, hey, we got to be anal about this stuff like we do everything else in life. Attention details everything. And we did. And, he's straight A student. He's 16 years old. If you met him, you'd never know he was any different. And we've always treated our kids that way. And so you talk about that, and you go back to when Lila was born. So there's a 5-year gap between the kids. And I remember seeing Nolan and going, hey, Nolan, so you're going to have a baby sister. What do you think about that? And he's like, that's cool. I'm so excited about that. And then we asked him, so what do you think? Is Lila going to have PKU? And, he's like, yeah, I hope she does. And so you got this beautiful 5-year-old little boy, and he doesn't know any better because he's just pure. And, as a parent, you just cry. Your heart breaks because you're like, I want that for my son so that he's not alone on one hand. But I don't want that for my daughter on the other hand, right? Because no parent does, right? So that was a hard thing for us to deal with when Lila was born. And of course, you fast forward now, and she's 11, and she's very healthy and active dancer and all these things. She's just a beautiful soul as well. And I think we've done an okay job. But one thing at the retreat that really came up when we talked about that, Trevor, is, I'm working on myself in all these other aspects of my life. The work that came out of it for me there was that I had totally not even considered that I have these 2 beautiful kids, because we've never treated them any different, right? We've always treated them as what we just deem normal, and never making a big deal about them having PKU, because not trying to draw attention to it for their own sake, as well as just allowing them to mesh in with everybody else. And because there's a lot of fear, between other kids and, oh, what is that? That's weird, and things like that. And those comments will be made. And, you're a mama and a daddy bear. You're going to protect your kids to some degree. So, but in doing that and protecting them and not treating any different like that, I think what I came to learn is like, that's the next thing I need to work on as a person, is really just go back to that trauma that happened. And then happen again, because to have 2 kids with it, they were shocked. Like it was the equivalent of the Powerball lottery is the analogy that they gave us at Children's Hospital. Like this never happened. So, and I think, why did it happen to Brandy and I? Because we can handle it, because we can deal with it. But I think, again, going back to the retreat, it's just being more aware of my children with this and how they're having to deal with it on a day-to-day. And that is the beautiful thing that came out of that last weekend, is just I came home with such a renewed point of perspective on how to treat them and I don't know, just to be a better parent overall if I can be, and be more aware.
Well, I'm glad we got to have that part of the conversation, because that was another big thing that's I saw you experience at the retreat, but also it was also the gift I think you gave everybody else too, which was we are all there to work on ourselves and to spend that selfish me time that we deserve. But we're also there for all of these other people in our lives that we care about so much, and we want to help so badly because we are committed, conscious creators of our reality. But I think there was an aha moment on the Sunday where all of us realize that us doing the work is actually helping heal our kids and our extended family and everybody, quite frankly, that we come in contact with. And that was a big moment for me on the weekend, was to see you show up completely open to whatever was downloaded to you, knowing that you maybe go into the experience with expectations while at the same time just kind of being like, I surrender to what is. But there's a difference between saying that and actually doing it, and really completely surrendering to like, oh shit, that's why I'm here. And I saw that in you. And that was a gift that you gave to everybody else. I just wanted to acknowledge you for that, man. 'Cause your vulnerability and your ability to let the emotions be right on the sleeve and be a big, like, dude, you're bigger than me and I'm pretty big, dude, like to see somebody that shows up with that kind of vulnerability and honesty, it inspires me. It really does. And, I want to spend more time with people like that. That's what I was craving 6 months ago, was to attract people like you into my life. So yeah, just want to acknowledge you for that, man. I appreciate you.
That's super kind, Trevor. I'm humbled by that. Thank you. And I think you doing this and getting the word out and how you're doing it, I think it's amazing. And keep doing it, because I think you've really created something special. And I would love to be a part of it however I can moving forward in terms of helping you guys in that cause. Because seeing 12 literally strangers come together in that environment, and all it takes is one to open that up, that floor, and you just saw it. Like, everybody else saw it and then contributed to it. And I think, everyone went back to their day to day, but I think everybody went back to their day to day with a different mindset. And I think that's amazing. So if we can be 1% better to our children, to our spouses, to our partners, to our coworkers, to strangers, why wouldn't you try? Like, what do you got to lose, right? The unknown is scary. Embrace that shit, because that's the best change that'll come out of life.
100%. Well, and we will definitely be continuing down this journey and integrating and everything, and finding the space and time to be able to connect and see how we can all support and elevate each other. And I got one more question for you before we sign off here, and that is, it might be challenging to even pick one, but what is the one thing that you are most grateful for right now in this moment?
Breath. It is everything, it's the life force. It all starts right here. And if we don't remember to take that deep breath throughout our day, I find that is the best thing to control all the craziness around us. And it creates that, just that calmness, right? You can't help but feel good when you take a deep breath. So.
Yep. That's a great answer. You just had me take a breath when you said it. Proof that sometimes we take for granted these things that are so simple that are available to us to access at any time, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, I want people to know how they can connect with you and the company as well, because one of the things that I want to be of service to you on as well, and we spoke about this when you were in the airport, is you have a story to tell, you have a message, you have a vision that's greater than you, and people get to experience that one little micro dose at a time, if we're going to use some mushroom analogies here. And yeah, this was another piece of that, I believe, was to allow people to understand the man behind the company. But how can people connect with the company, but then also you personally, because I know that you're committed to stepping up and being that person, that extension of, just sharing your vision to serve and heal the world.
Yeah, thanks. We've got two companies on the functional side. You can reach out at, EversioWellness.com. That's EversioWellness.com. And you can get in touch with me there. On the lab side, it's Eversio Labs, so very much the same, just eversiolabs.com. If you want to learn and do some research on psychedelics and what's going on there, we're starting human trials soon. We're pretty excited about that. So there's lots of cool things going on there. And then personally, if you want to reach me and I can be of help in any way, you can email me personally at craig.g@eversiowellness.com. So that's about it.
Cool. Well, I'll link it all up. And I look forward to you sharing more of your journey and the stories and just all of the research that you guys are doing and just the education, the awareness that you're bringing to this space, because it's important, right? There's still a lot of uncertainty and lack of clarity and fear around all of the topics that we're talking about. And that gets unlocked one conversation at a time, one piece of content at a time. So thanks, man. I really appreciate this. And I love you, man. I really do. Like, I am so grateful that we were able to connect and meet at the retreat and what we'll create together in the future as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Trevor. I really appreciate it. Appreciate the environment you created. And I love you too, man. I think you're a wonderful human being. And I love what you're doing for everybody out there. I think however we can support you in doing that, it's going to make for a better place. So I think we're very much aligned that way. Let's find a way to do it.
Absolutely. All right, brother. Thanks so much for doing this.
Take care. Be well.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of The Trevor Turnbull Show. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please consider subscribing on my YouTube channel, as well as on your favorite podcast platform. So until next time, remember, today is a beautiful day of opportunity. Trust that you are exactly where you're supposed to be. So be grateful, be curious, and be brave. Yes.